So I'll talk around low carbon mobility and sort of present you even more granular case. So hopefully you'll participate in the exercise. I set this up as a case study where you would take some time off and sort of do some group work. Or we could just sort of break there, take 2 minutes and have some responses from the audience before we move forward. So just to see, I mean, this is very typical scenes in India, and I'm sure many of the cities that you come from. And this is not bad. I mean, this is what we call transportation rich. You have lots of choices. You can get to where you want. The air quality isn't exactly the best, but there is mixed use and things you want are right there. It's just really how do we keep this sort of access to many modes and shopping on the street and everything, and improve the quality of the air and the environment in which these vehicles operate. I mean, that's what we really strive for. So in just in the Indian context, what are the three sort of trends affecting urban mobility? And urbanization, of course, and what has come with urbanization is motorization, and also sort of what we call motorized trip making. So I mean, people made the trips. I mean, and trips, everybody makes 2 to 3 trips a day, and trips include either going to the shop downstairs to buy a little your bread, or going to work. And what happens is, sort of in our older settings when cities were smaller, etc., we didn't really count those small things as trips. Children walk to school, but as we motorize and cities grow, suddenly these sort of trips suddenly become much more meaningful and have a larger impact on the mobility of the city. And then especially in the Indian context also, and as more women participate in the workforce, and also as we move to more the service sector kind of an economy, you're no longer in the industrial age where you're staying next to where you work and you live there 40 years. It's two working members in the household, and it does many things. One is you don't then choose to live close to one person's work. You most of the times live somewhere in between. The other thing is there's no income in the house. More income in the house means the children go to the school of choice, which is probably not in the neighborhood. You have access to vehicles, maybe multiple vehicles, and suddenly, as soon as the women participation in the workforce happens, there is also a very significant rise in motorization. If anybody is interested, there's sort of a whole body of literature that's been written around this subject, and I mean, I don't want to get into that, but and so all of that really results in exponential increase in transport demand. And this is just to give you some sort of numbers from India, including some projections on just sort of urban travel demand, and you can see right now we're sort of at around 300 million trips, and we'll get to 1800 million trips. And that's a huge. Now, how much of this can we actually keep on low carbon modes or on zero carbon modes, that's walking and cycling, is going to be the key thing. This was some work we did with our late founder Dr. Lee Schipper, where he did some scenarios on estimations for growth of greenhouse gases from urban transport in India, and you can see that. And that's just sort of one scenario where it goes. Right now we are at about sort of 55 million tons, and we can go to like scenarios where we can be 700 million tons, or we can stay to scenarios which are as low as 400 million tons. And even that is sort of a big leap. And we can talk about the choices of how to get there. And the transport challenge is not. It's also about quality of life. It's about fatalities. We always joke about things like low carbon deaths and clean congestion. So, but safety is a big issue. It's going to be the 5th biggest cause of death by 2030 in the world, road fatalities. And if you look at the first 4 causes of death, they're all related to air pollution, and cardiovascular diseases. So how we build transport in our cities is going to be extremely crucial on how healthy our cities are. And there's of course the problem of congestion and sprawl, etc. So the challenge is sort of multidimensional. It's sort of the low carbon on one side, but then there's also the whole life kind of issues. So just quickly run you through 2 case studies of what some 2 cities in India have done in the last 10 years, and and we can see sort of what choices they had and what choices they made. So this is sort of, again, and you can click this picture in any city of India, and I'm sure a lot of the cities you come from. This is Ahmedabad in the early 2000s. Population was, it was close to 4 million actually in the early 2000s. Rate of growth was 3.5%, so really fast growing city. Rapid increase in two-wheelers. There was a real big deterioration in air quality. And it was rated the 12th most polluted city in the world. And there was about 4,500 premature deaths due to local air pollution. So this was the situation, right? Just sort of presenting you a situation that the decision makers were confronted with. Similarly, this is a picture from Bangalore, right? And many of you might have heard about Bangalore. And this is our cities in India right now. Population was 6.5 million in early 2000s. Today it's a mega city. It's close to 10 million people. Again, sort of really rapid growth, 4.4% a year, and rapid vehicle growth at percent. So and again, sort of there was really bad traffic jams. There were big businesses that were setting up, and now they were contemplating moving out of the city. And also there was equally strong pressure from the local groups about fixing something about transport. So what I'm going to ask you is sort of both cities were the capital cities. They both were sort of the economic engines. So financial capital wasn't that much of an issue, or at least they had access to financial capital. And also at the same time the central government had sort of launched this scheme to do the JNURM scheme, which is the national program in India to support urban infrastructure, that also made available some money to the cities. So I'm going to sort of ask you this question. So what would you do in these cities? What could these cities do? So if we can have a little sort of moment and sort of think about what can be done, then I can show what happened in these cities. So really, these were the choices for the cities. And so, if you want, we could do a quick vote, who votes on 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then we can see what the cities. So, if you want sort of a couple minutes to think about it, or say something, or else I'm going to ask if you want to vote. So, voting is good. Who's going to vote on 1? Any votes on 1? All right, we got 1 vote on 1. Any votes on 2? So some votes on 2. Yeah, okay.
3 votes for 2. Okay.
Any votes on 3?
You only allowed 1 vote, or do we have more than 1?
You can have more than 1 vote.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And any votes on 4? So large portion of the room thinks 4. So anyway, just the idea. So let's see what they did. Especially Ahmedabad, they really invested in buses, and just to sort of and then reflect what they did, and then specifically how did it impact. We can take a look. So basically there were three real sort of innovations. One was innovation service, including sort of providing segregation. There was dramatic increases in supplies, and then lots of other service quality improvements. And we can look at some of the examples, but in Ahmedabad they really did the BRT system. Some might be aware they are in the process of sort of building it still. It's pretty amazing. They started planning the system in 2005, and today in 2013 they have 60 kilometers of mass transport, and in another 2 years they will finish 90 kilometers, and then by 2015 they're going to have a 130 kilometer network. So this is a great example of a city that had absolutely no mass transport, that has built like a system together in 9 years, and at the cost of it's 2,000 crores. So that's that 5 million. So it's in like about $500 million. So at about $500 million, they've built a system that's 150 kilometers in less than 10 years, a mass transport. So here's how it looks. There's some pictures. This is really it's in the middle of the street, with sort of stations of high quality, and also ensuring integration. What you see in the corner there is a sort of out of station state transport bus stop, so people can go. There's sort of easy crossings that get you to the side of the street. So this is really a full system, and this is just some numbers, and the system is really fast expanding. So what is in dotted is what the system was, the system in construction, and then recently they've just opened this line. They're in the process of sort of connecting the inner city, and they're also sort of building this line up now. So really fast expansion, and at a very sort of relatively low cost, and it's high quality. Ridership has been quite good from the beginning, and you see a lot of sort of low income people, etc., also using the system. It also sort of, not only did it invest in the BRT, it also sort of really improved its fleet for the rest of the city. So the rest of the system functions as feeders to these buses, also connects certain generators like the university and other employment centers. So it just sort of shows you how they've constantly grown their fleet, and also what you see on the and it's also the service kilometers, sort of the kind of service that they provide. They replaced the fleet, so they did a big exercise of also cleaning up their fleet. They moved to CNG fuel, and also sort of really replaced their fleet, and they used some very innovative methods of replacing their fleet, which is working with sort of private contractors and private operators through very well drawn contracts. And so they are no longer so they transitioned also from being fully being operators to using the private sector to actually do the operations of the buses with very tightly regulated contracts. So now let's look at Bangalore, and again I'm sort of rushing through this so we can take some questions later. In Bangalore, they sort of didn't go the full bus rapid transit way, but Bangalore also has grown and has a lot of sort of immigrants that have come into the city, and the old bus system only displayed things in looks like is called Big Ten, but it also it looks like it's local language script. So, and there was a lot of buy-in from the local people, and this service really has tremendously improved actually the middle class using the buses as well. And so just to sort of quickly show, it was very simple. One of the big reasons that was identified was that people don't understand how to take the bus, so they just designed a very simple system. There was a lot of pressure on them saying people will not transfer to come onto this system, but that was not the case. The usage has been really high right from the beginning, and and in general, Bangalore has seen some really dramatic increase in public transport. They really invested in the buses. Right now the system is 6,000 buses, and it carries 5 million people. About 42% of the motorized trips in the city are done by buses, and they keep innovating. They created different classes of services for different portions of sections of the society. So they have some services that are lower priced and provide the basic service, and then they also have sort of much higher and better quality buses, and that's where they actually really increase the fares as well. So this was one sort of fairly sort of innovative thing that they did, some other couple of other things that they did also is and this is what you really need to also think about, is one of the biggest challenges to expanding bus systems is having enough land to park your buses. This is a problem every city in India is facing. So if you have that problem and you have the choice to make a decision, on the outskirts, try to identify some land that you want to lock on right now, because that's what when your system becomes bigger. And that was one of the things that Bangalore and Ahmedabad both did well. The other thing is, as the adjoining villages became a part of the city, what they started doing is what they call the night halt schedules, was they would send a bus in the night. So in the morning, the first thing, the bus would come into the city, and what that does is also sort of really allows all the people from the villages coming into the city to make sure that they can get to the city on the first bus. Otherwise, if you wait to send the first bus from your city into the village, then you're never going to get those people, because they really need to come into the city early in the morning. So this is sort of the Ahmedabad bus ridership increase. So the overall annual rate of growth of ridership is 15.6%. In sort of the 7-year time duration, there is a 175% increase in bus ridership. So really dramatic. There's mode shifts. So people have moved from ordinary buses to the BRT, but also there's people moving from sort of the informal auto rickshaw type of services and also from two-wheelers. And this is just sort of showing you some of the CO2 savings then that come from that increase in ridership. So this is clearly a climate change sort of mitigation strategy. Similarly, in Bangalore, again, annual growth rate is 6.8%. Overall increase is 58%. And this is from, base levels of 3 million riders. So it's phenomenal. I mean, this kind of growth is sort of unheard of public transport systems. 5 million users is a lot of people, public transport. It's probably one of the top 5 largest bus systems in the world. And again, with their little innovation, which was just a part of the fleet, also they got, where I think so wherever you've been able to provide better quality of service, you've managed to bring people on from private vehicle modes to come into sort of the innovative services. Again, sort of just some estimates of the cumulative savings. Again, if anybody's interested, there's a paper we published about this, so happy to share it, which has all sorts of the details of the methodologies and calculations. So since this is a leadership program, I also thought I'll bring you something else that we've sort of been doing in Bangalore with the government. Is the sort of the head of the Bangalore Transit Agency said, I also want to sort of create a vision as we sort of do these various improvements that will tie all of these things together and also really motivate the people in our bus company. And so in partnership, we together have come up with this whole thing which we call Vision 10. And what this Vision 10 is, they started with this innovation called Big 10 Services. And now they're saying that by 2020, they want to go from 5 million passengers to 10 million passengers, and from 6,000 buses to 10,000 buses. And they did a little event in their office, and everybody was wearing number 10 shirts. So now everybody feels like a center forward. And, and so it's just also sort of really motivating, really creating the vision, motivating everybody on your team to be able to really sort of think together towards sort of, even though they're doing the small changes, how it also adds up to the larger vision. So, I was just sort of quickly presenting you the case studies since I'd set this up. I'm just going to quickly take 5 more minutes, if that's okay, and wrap up sort of the big messages that I would give, especially sort of to think about urban mobility in the climate change context. So, we need significant improvements in public transport, both in quantity but also in quality. And the quality also has to account for how people get to public transport. So, you can't provide world-class trains and have people struggle through sort of broken sidewalks and, jump over sort of garbage bins to get to the mass transport. So, you really have to think about quality of the whole ride. Bus-based public transport, and there's enough evidence on how it can actually be a very quick way to improve the quality of mass transport or public transport in your cities. There are splendid examples from across the world, and pretty much you can do any sort of capacity with these bus systems, but very quickly in like 10 years you can completely transform your city, even if it has like no public transport, to having sort of a world-class public transport system, and and then it's sort of very effective on reducing carbon footprint. But so really we just sort of 2 big messages, sort of how do we sort of approach the urban mobility problem in general. And I made the little joke of the then I don't know if the previous speakers have introduced this framework, and it's really how to think about transport, because as people usually think about sort of climate change, etc. It's all about sort of it's about improving technology. And the whole climate change discussion in the last 20 years, when you talk about transport, it's all about doing electric vehicles. It's about sort of doing the fuel efficiency. It's about doing the technological innovations. But then there's also the quality problem, and also sort of I made the joke, but it's true. You'll have low carbon deaths. You'll have clean congestion. And if you really want to holistically address this problem, then there is a larger framework that the whole sort of sustainable transport community has adopted as the low carbon strategy for transport. They call it the avoid, shift, and improve framework. What it means is, the avoid part actually means you can avoid motorized trips, or you can do better land use planning to avoid the distance of the trips. Jobs can be closer to housing. You can even, and that's sort of the larger thing. The simple thing to do is to have access to shopping or mixed use facilities where people live. So at least for going to schools or doing a small trips, you can avoid sort of motorized trips for that. Shift is shifting to low carbon emission modes, so really building the mass transport so people have the choice to move to lower emitting modes. And then sort of the improve, which is where the community has been really focusing, is the move to go to electric vehicles and the clean fuels and things like that. And again, sort of I showed you that sort of thing for India where we were going to go from 50 million tons to 400 million tons. And if we were to sort of look at those sort of mitigation strategies, right, in the avoid, shift, improve categories, then the biggest opportunity is in actually doing the avoid. So again, if you're going to think about sort of climate change and transport, it's actually going beyond transport, really thinking about how you plan your cities and how you develop your cities. And sort of that's, again, this is another paper that we have, happy to share, but sort of the biggest opportunities there are also in the avoid and the shift. So if someone comes to you and say, I have 100 electric vehicles, and why don't you sort of take that, and that will be your sort of climate change mitigation strategy for urban mobility, I think that's not the whole picture. I think we need to make sure that you take a look at the whole picture and look at it in this context, and then sort of identify what you choose to do. And I think the other thing, and I know you are here from many countries, but I'm sure this is relevant to a lot of countries where the cities are rapidly expanding, is cities are going to grow. In India, that's sort of something which I'm sure that's true in all of South Asia and Chinese cities. Cities are going to grow. How much they grow is really the question. Can we make good decisions to ensure our cities don't sprawl too much? And this is some work we did using Ahmedabad again as a scenario, where we looked. Today, Ahmedabad is 5 million people. In 2040, it's going to be 13 million people, right? And today, it's, the area is about 1,300 square kilometers. So, based on just sort of how cities have grown, we sort of made some estimates on how big Ahmedabad can grow. And it depends a lot on the choices they make on both transport and also on their land use. But the difference between this scenario and this scenario, if we were to look purely from the lens of emissions from urban transport, is an order of magnitude different. So this is 12 million tons and this is 2 million tons of CO2. So whatever policies we make, if we are really serious about impacting, like sort of doing climate change mitigation, we want to go to this scenario and not to this scenario. And that, to me, every square kilometer that you don't expand your city, you will always have positive implications, not just on transport, on water, on energy, on every single dimension of sort of CO2 consumed. And so, I think the big opportunity also is to make the right choices, and transport is an extremely important driver. If you build that ring road sort of 40 kilometers outside the city, your city will sprawl. So, really focusing your development on the arterials, trying to make sure that, really putting growth restrictions along the ring road, if you do establish them, these are sort of very important things that have to be considered, because this is where you will actually get much more benefits than doing any of these sort of other methods. So, thank you.